Did ancient Romans really blow out birthday candles made of cheese? It sounds absurd, like something a sleepy historian might dream up after too much wine. But the truth about early birthday celebrations is even stranger than you'd imagine. Which bizarre rituals did our ancestors perform to mark another year of survival? And how did these peculiar customs, cheese and all, eventually transform into the cake and candle traditions we can't imagine birthdays without? Here's the thing. If you travel back to ancient Rome on someone's birthday, you wouldn't find anything resembling our modern celebrations. No wrapped presents, no party hats, and definitely no one hovering over a frosted cake while friends sang off key. Instead, you'd witness something far more intense. The Romans took birthdays seriously, deadly seriously, because they believed evil spirits were particularly interested in attacking people on their birthdays. Something about the anniversary of your birth, they thought, made you vulnerable to supernatural mischief. So tonight, as we trace the surprisingly twisted path of birthday cakes through American history, you'll discover why millions of us still perform rituals that would have made perfect sense to a superstitious Roman baker. Along the way, you might find your breathing getting slower, your thoughts growing quieter, and perhaps you'll understand why we still insist on certain birthday traditions that make absolutely no logical sense in the modern world. Before we begin this journey, consider subscribing if these bedtime histories help you unwind. And I'd love to know, what's the strangest birthday tradition your family insists on keeping alive? Drop it in the comments below. Now, find that sweet spot in your pillow where your head fits just right, let your shoulders drop, and allow yourself to sink a little deeper into comfort. Close your eyes if you haven't already, and let's travel back, way back, to where this whole birthday cake obsession actually started. You're standing in ancient Greece, around 700 BCE, and the air smells like honey and smoke. The Greeks are doing something unusual. They're baking round cakes to honor Artemis, goddess of the moon. These aren't birthday cakes exactly, but watch what they're doing. They're placing lit candles on top of these honey cakes, trying to make them glow like the moon itself. The smoke from these candles, they believe, carries their prayers and wishes up to the goddess. It's the first time in recorded history that anyone combines cake, candles, and wishes into a single ritual. But here's where it gets interesting and slightly disturbing. The Greeks didn't just light candles for aesthetic purposes. They believed the flickering flames had protective power, that the light could ward off evil spirits who might be lurking nearby, waiting to curse someone on their special day. Every birthday, they thought, was a spiritual battlefield, and cake was somehow part of the armor. The Romans, never ones to pass up a good party idea, took this concept and ran with it. But they added their own twist, literally. Roman birthday celebrations included something called libum, a honey cheese cake that was more savory than sweet. Yes, cheesecake, but not the creamy New York style you're thinking of. This was a dense, salty sweet hybrid made with flour, eggs, and fresh cheese, often shaped into spirals and offered to the household gods. The The birthday person would break off pieces and throw them into the fire, because apparently the gods preferred their cake medium rare. Now, I know what you're thinking. How did we get from throwing cheese spirals into fires to singing Happy Birthday around a chocolate cake? Well, the journey is about to get even weirder. The Romans had another birthday tradition that might sound familiar. They believed in the genius, a personal spirit assigned to each man at birth. Women had a similar spirit called a Juno. On your birthday, you were expected to make offerings to your genius or Juno, usually wine, incense, and yes, those cheesecakes. The idea was that if you kept your personal spirit happy, it would protect you for another year. Miss your birthday offering, and who knows what misfortune might befall you. Evidence suggests that wealthy Romans took these birthday spirits very seriously. Archaeological findings from Pompeii show elaborate birthday altars in private homes, complete with special holders for birthday candles, though these were made of tallow or beeswax, not cheese, despite what some creative food historians might claim. The candles served a dual purpose, honoring the protective spirit and creating enough light to keep evil at bay during the vulnerable birthday hours. But then something unexpected happened. Christianity arrived and basically canceled birthdays for about 1,000 years. Early Christians considered birthday celebrations pagan, which, to be fair, they absolutely were. The Church Fathers argued that celebrating birthdays was vain, worldly, and too closely associated with those spirit-worshipping Romans. Instead, Christians were encouraged to celebrate the birthdays of martyred saints, which is wonderfully ironic when you think about it, celebrating the day someone died rather than the day they were born. Historical records from the 4th century indicate that some Christians were actively discouraged from acknowledging their birthdays at all. St. Augustine himself wrote against what he called the heathen custom of birthday festivities, though evidence points to plenty of regular folks ignoring this advice and celebrating quietly anyway. You can imagine them sneaking a little honey cake when the priest wasn't looking, maybe lighting a single candle, just to be safe. The debate over birthday celebrations reveals something fascinating about human nature. We really want to mark the passage of time in our lives. Even when religious authorities condemn the practice, people found ways to commemorate their personal anniversaries. Medieval records show that while official birthday parties were forbidden, people would mark their name days, the feast day of their patron saint, with remarkably birthday-like celebrations. Same cake, different excuse. Most scholars believe that this underground birthday resistance never fully disappeared. It just went into hiding for several centuries. Bakers in medieval Europe continued making special cakes for special occasions. They just called them different names. A Saint's Day cake looked suspiciously similar to what we'd recognize as a birthday cake, round, sweet, sometimes even decorated with symbols that had nothing to do with any particular saint. Yet the strangest part of this ancient birthday story, the part that makes me wonder what those Romans were really thinking, is how seriously they took the danger of birthdays. They genuinely believed that on the anniversary of your birth, you stood at a crossroads between fortune and disaster. The spirits were watching, waiting, deciding whether to grant you another year of life or, well, not. And somehow, cheese, cake, and candles were supposed to tip the scales in your favor. As our story moves forward, drifting like smoke from those ancient birthday candles, you'll see how these pagan fears and protective rituals didn't disappear. They just put on new clothes, learned new languages, and sailed across an ocean to a new world where they would transform once again. Which medieval monks accidentally invented the first birthday treats? The answer involves a lot more honey, prayer, and kitchen explosions than you'd expect. You're wandering through a Benedictine monastery in southern Germany. It's the year 1203, and Brother Heinrich has just ruined another batch of what they call Lebkuchen. The kitchen smells like burnt honey and disappointment. He's been trying to recreate a spiced honey cake recipe that traveling merchants brought from the Middle East, but medieval ovens aren't exactly precision instruments. Too hot, and you get charcoal. Too cool, and you get a sticky mess that even the monastery pigs won't eat. But here's what makes Brother Heinrich important to our story. He's not trying to make birthday cakes. He's trying to make medicine. Medieval monks believed that certain combinations of honey, spices, and prayers could cure everything from melancholy to plague. The sweeter the medicine, they reasoned, the more likely patients would actually take it. So monasteries became accidental bakeries, mixing theology with sugar in ways that would eventually reshape how Americans celebrate birthdays. The monks had stumbled onto something without realizing it. Their honey cakes, originally meant for healing the sick, started appearing at other occasions. Feast days, saint celebrations, and yes, quietly, secretly, birthdays. You see, while the church officially frowned on birthday celebrations, individual monks were remarkably flexible about what constituted a saint's day. If your name was John, well, there were at least a dozen St. Johns to choose from. Surely one of them had a feast day near your actual birthday. Archaeological evidence from medieval monastery kitchens reveals something fascinating: the evolution of cake-making tools that had no real purpose except creating elaborate desserts. Why would austere monks need specialized molds for shaping honey cakes into flowers, angels, or crowns? The prevailing theory is that monasteries were competing, trying to attract wealthy patrons with increasingly impressive confections. Nothing says donate to our monastery quite like a 3-tier honey cake decorated with edible gold leaf. I love imagining some stern abbot discovering his monks decorating cakes at 2 in the morning, frantically trying to explain that it's for, the glory of God, definitely not for the Duke's daughter's birthday tomorrow. The real breakthrough came sometime around 1400, when German bakers started adding eggs to their honey cakes. This seems simple, but it changed everything. Eggs made the cakes lighter, fluffier, more like what we recognize as cake today. They also made them more expensive, which meant that special occasion cakes became status symbols. Having a proper egg-based cake at your celebration, even if you couldn't officially call it a birthday party, meant you had money to burn. Records from Nuremberg, dating to 1487, describe something called Kinderfest, children's parties that definitely weren't birthday parties, except they happened once a year on the same date for each specific child. These Kinderfest featured a special cake called Geburtstagstorten, which literally translates to birthday cake place, but surely that was just coincidence. The church authorities seemed remarkably willing to look the other way, as long as nobody actually said the word birthday out loud. But wait, the monk's story gets even stranger. Evidence points to monasteries across Europe developing their own secret cake recipes, guarded as carefully as any religious relic. The Cistercians in France created something with almonds and rose water. Italian monasteries experimented with ricotta and citrus. Spanish monks, perhaps influenced by Moorish traditions, added dates and figs to their confections. Each order claimed their recipe had divine inspiration, though it's more likely they were just really bored. The fascinating scholarly debate here centers on intentionality. Some historians argue that monks deliberately preserved and transformed pagan birthday traditions, hiding them in plain sight within Christian celebrations. Others insist it was purely accidental, that monks just happened to create birthday cake-like objects for completely unrelated reasons. The evidence, frustratingly, supports both theories. Medieval monks were excellent at keeping secrets, even from future historians. What we do know is that by the 1500s, German-speaking regions had developed elaborate birthday traditions that would have horrified early Christian authorities. The Kinderfest had evolved into full-blown birthday parties, complete with cakes, candles, and presents. The birthday child would receive a cake with candles, one for each year of life plus an extra one for good luck. They called this extra candle the light of life, and the child wasn't allowed to blow out the candles until evening, when the family gathered to eat the cake together. Now here's where the monk's influence becomes undeniable. These weren't simple peasant cakes. They were elaborate constructions, using techniques directly traceable to monastery kitchens. Layering, glazing, decorating with nuts and dried fruits, even early forms of what we'd recognize as frosting. The monks had spent 3 centuries perfecting the art of making special occasion cakes, and now their techniques were spreading beyond monastery walls. You can picture it, a young baker's apprentice, trained by monks, setting up shop in a growing German town. He knows how to make cakes that look like castles, taste like heaven, and cost more than most people make in a month. But for your child's birthday, just this once, maybe it's worth it. After all, it's not really a birthday cake, it's a Kinderfest spiritual protection pastry. Totally different thing. The protective element never quite disappeared either. Those birthday candles weren't just for decoration. They were still about warding off evil spirits. The tradition held that the birthday child had to blow out all the candles in one breath, Otherwise, the wish wouldn't come true. But what nobody talked about, what everybody somehow knew, was that the wish was really a prayer for protection. Please let me survive another year. Please keep the evil spirits away. Please let there be more cake. Historical accounts from Protestant regions after the Reformation show something interesting. When monasteries were dissolved, their cake recipes didn't disappear. They went underground, passed from baker to baker, mother to daughter, preserved in family cookbooks with cryptic notes like Sister Agnes's Feast Day Honey Bread or Father Johann's Special Occasion Tort. The monks were gone, but their sweet legacy lived on. The strangest transformation happened in the late 1500s when German Protestant reformers, the very people who had kicked out the monks, decided that birthday celebrations were actually acceptable, as long as they focused on gratitude to God for another year of life. Suddenly, birthday cakes weren't pagan or Catholic, they were Protestant expressions of thanksgiving. The same cake, the same candles, the same wishes, but now with official religious approval. You've got to admire the flexibility. Consider this irony. Monks who were forbidden from celebrating birthdays spent centuries perfecting birthday cakes. They created the techniques, developed the recipes, established the tradition of making something special and sweet for important occasions. They just couldn't admit what they were doing. As these German cake traditions grew stronger, more elaborate, more essential to childhood, something else was happening across the ocean. Colonial Americans were struggling to survive, and birthday cakes were the absolute last thing on their minds. Or were they? As our story continues, drifting across the Atlantic like the smell of fresh-baked bread, you'll discover that even in the harshest conditions, humans find ways to mark their special days, even if they have to get creative about it. The question is, what did they use instead of sugar, and why did it make their children cry? Could colonial Americans even find sugar for their children's birthdays? The answer depends on how desperate you were and how creative you could get with maple syrup and cornmeal. You're standing in a Massachusetts kitchen in 1652, and little Mary Williams is turning 7 years old. Her mother has been saving for 3 months, carefully hoarding a handful of precious white sugar that cost more than their monthly rent. But there's a problem. It's not enough for a cake. Not even close. So Mary's mother does what colonial mothers did. She improvises. She mixes the sugar with dried apples, cornmeal, and molasses to create something that's technically sweet, technically cake-shaped, and technically edible. Mary will remember this birthday treat for the rest of her life, though not necessarily fondly. The reality of colonial American celebrations was harsh. Sugar had to be imported from the West Indies, making it approximately as expensive as silver by weight. The average colonial family might see refined sugar once or twice a year, if they were lucky. Most colonists relied on honey when they could find it, maple syrup in the north, or molasses if they lived near a port. But even these alternatives were precious commodities, not something you'd waste on frivolous celebrations. Evidence from colonial household accounts reveals a fascinating pattern. Families would sometimes pool resources for children's birthdays. 3 or 4 families might contribute ingredients, creating one shared cake for all the children born in the same season. It wasn't exactly personalized birthday treatment, but it was better than nothing. These communal cakes were usually simple molasses-sweetened breads, dense enough to double as building material, but special because they only appeared on these occasions. Here's what kills me about colonial birthday attempts. They tried so hard to maintain European traditions in a land that seemed determined to thwart them at every turn. Dutch colonists in New Amsterdam insisted on making oliekoeken for special occasions, even though they had to substitute bear fat for butter. English colonists attempted their traditional plum cakes, minus the plums, the proper flour, and most of the other ingredients. The results were, well, let's just say love makes everything taste better. The Puritans, of course, had their own special relationship with birthday celebrations. They considered them papist nonsense, right up there with Christmas and having fun in general. But here's the thing about Puritans that historians have recently discovered. They were massive hypocrites about sweets. Personal diaries from the period reveal secret birthday observances, usually disguised as Day of Thanksgiving for the child's health or something equally austere sounding. Samuel Sewall's diary, one of the most detailed colonial records we have, mentions giving his children special treats on specific dates that just happened to coincide with their births. The scholarly debate around colonial birthdays centers on this question. Did the harsh conditions of early America kill birthday traditions or transform them? Some historians argue that survival took precedence over celebration, that birthdays were a luxury colonists couldn't afford. Others point to evidence like decorated pottery fragments and specialized cake molds found in archaeological sites, suggesting that colonists found ways to celebrate despite the hardships. The truth probably lies somewhere in between. Birthdays happened. They just looked nothing like what colonists remembered from home. Moving south, the situation was completely different, but equally complicated. Wealthy plantation owners in Virginia and the Carolinas had access to sugar, lots of it, but they had their own problems. The heat and humidity made traditional European cakes nearly impossible to bake properly. Frosting would melt, cakes would mold, and everything attracted insects that seemed personally offended by the existence of sugar. Colonial cookbooks from the period include increasingly desperate advice. If the flies prove troublesome, cover the cake entirely with cheesecloth soaked in vinegar, which probably didn't improve the taste. Yet, something remarkable was happening in colonial kitchens, the birth of distinctly American birthday treats. Without access to traditional ingredients, colonists started experimenting. Indigenous ingredients like cornmeal, pumpkin, and cranberries found their way into special occasion cakes. A recipe from 1679 describes something called Indian cake, made primarily from cornmeal and maple syrup, decorated with dried berries and nuts. It sounds more like granola than cake, but colonial children didn't know any better. I imagine those colonial kids gathering around a lumpy cornmeal cake, singing whatever version of birthday songs existed then, probably hymns with the words changed, trying to blow out tallow candles that smelled like sheep fat. Not exactly Instagram worthy, but those moments mattered just as much as any modern celebration. The real innovation came from German and Dutch communities in Pennsylvania around 1700. These groups had stronger communal bonds and, more importantly, better organizational skills when it came to acquiring sugar. They established cooperative buying arrangements with merchants, essentially bulk ordering sugar to reduce costs. By pooling their resources, they could maintain more elaborate birthday traditions than their English neighbors. The Pennsylvania Dutch became famous for their funny cakes, which despite the name were actually quite delicious, combining pie and cake elements in ways that would have horrified European bakers, but delighted American children. Religious communities like the Moravians took birthday cakes seriously, very seriously. They believed that celebrating a child's birthday was a religious duty, acknowledging God's gift of life. Moravian settlements had communal bakeries that produced special birthday cakes for every child in the community. These weren't elaborate affairs, usually simple spice cakes sweetened with honey, but they were consistent. Every child got one, no exceptions. This egalitarian approach to birthday cakes was revolutionary in a society where most celebrations depended entirely on social class. The most heartbreaking colonial birthday accounts come from frontier settlements. Mothers would save sugar for months, sometimes years, to make their child a proper birthday cake. There are documented cases of women walking 20 miles to trading posts, trading valuable goods for small amounts of sugar, just to maintain this one tradition from home. One account from Kentucky in 1742 describes a mother who traded her only pair of good shoes for enough sugar to make her daughter's 10th birthday cake. The cake, by all accounts, was terrible. The gesture, priceless. What's particularly interesting is how colonial hardship actually strengthened the importance of birthday cakes in American culture. When something is scarce, it becomes more valuable. When every ingredient requires sacrifice, the final product carries more meaning. These weren't just cakes. They were symbols of love, prosperity, and hope for the future. A successful birthday cake meant you'd survived another year. Your family was stable enough to celebrate, and maybe, just maybe, things were getting better. By the mid-1700s, something was shifting in colonial America. Trade routes were stabilizing. Sugar was becoming slightly more affordable. Bakeries were opening in larger towns. And a new wave of immigrants was arriving, bringing with them elaborate birthday traditions and, more importantly, the skills to execute them properly. The age of the American birthday cake was about to begin in earnest. As the colonial period drew to a close, as revolution stirred and new ideas about equality and individual rights took hold, birthday cakes were about to undergo their own revolution. The question was no longer whether Americans could find sugar for birthdays, but rather what kind of birthday cakes would define this new nation. Soon, very soon, German immigrants would arrive with recipes that would change everything, and birthday cakes would never be the same. German immigrants pack their cake pans alongside their dreams, arriving in American ports with copper molds shaped like lambs, roosters, and elaborate castles, determined to transform this rough country's primitive birthday celebrations into something worthy of their heritage. You're watching the ship-charming Nancy Dock in Philadelphia, September 1732. And among the 300 German immigrants stumbling onto American soil is Anna Zimmerman, clutching a leather satchel that contains her most precious possessions. Not money, not jewelry, but her grandmother's handwritten recipe book and a set of intricate cake molds that traveled all the way from the Palatinate region. Anna doesn't speak English, has exactly 4 shillings to her name, and nowhere to sleep tonight, but she knows 17 different ways to make Geburtstagsken, and in her mind, that's worth something. These German immigrants, particularly those from the southwestern regions, brought with them a birthday cake culture that was already centuries old and dizzyingly elaborate. While colonial Americans were struggling to scrape together enough molasses for a simple sweet bread, Germans had been perfecting the art of the Schichtort, layer cakes that required engineering skills to keep them from toppling over. They knew how to make marzipan roses, sponge sugar decorations, and something called chaume, a primitive meringue that seemed to defy gravity. The transformation began almost immediately in Pennsylvania Dutch country. Within months of settling, German bakers were setting up shops that bewildered their English neighbors. These weren't just bakeries, they were temples to sugar and butter, producing creations that looked more like architecture than food. A newspaper account from Lancaster in 1751 describes a birthday cake made for a wealthy merchant's daughter. Standing near 2 feet in height, decorated with no fewer than 40 sugar flowers, and requiring 2 men to carry it to table. But here's what made the German influence so powerful. They didn't just bring recipes, they brought an entire philosophy about birthdays. In German culture, your Geburtstag wasn't just another day. It was a celebration of your unique existence, your personal new year, deserving of special recognition. They had specific traditions for every age, special cakes for significant birthdays, and most importantly, they had the technical knowledge to execute these traditions properly. The recipes themselves were closely guarded secrets, passed from mother to daughter with the solemnity of religious texts. Each family had their variation, their special ingredient, their particular technique for achieving the perfect crumb. Some added cardamom brought from the old country, hidden in hems and coat linings during the crossing. Others experimented with American ingredients, creating hybrid cakes that combined German technique with local flavors like hickory nuts and persimmons. Archaeological evidence from German-American settlements shows something remarkable: specialized baking equipment that appears nowhere else in colonial America. Springform pans, angel food cake molds, devices for creating uniform layers, tools that suggest these immigrants prioritized elaborate baking despite often living in primitive conditions. You might not have proper windows in your cabin, but by God, you'd have the right pan for making Google Huff. The real revolution happened in the 1760s when German bakers started training American apprentices. Suddenly, young men from English and Scottish families were learning the mysteries of creaming butter properly, the exact temperature needed for different types of sugar work, the patience required for making proper buttercream. These apprentices took German techniques and adapted them to American tastes and ingredients, creating something entirely new. I picture those first American apprentices, probably teenage boys who just wanted to eat cake all day, suddenly discovering that German baking was basically chemistry with more butter. The masters were notoriously strict, demanding perfection in everything from egg white peaks to the precise angle of decorative piping. One wrong move, and you'd be starting over from scratch, which in an era when ingredients cost a fortune was no small matter. The influence spread outward from Pennsylvania like ripples in a pond. German bakers established shops in Baltimore, New York, eventually as far south as Charleston. Each brought their regional specialties. Bavarians with their chocolate cakes, Rhinelanders with their fruit torts, Swabians with their mysterious ability to make cakes that stayed fresh for weeks. They competed fiercely with each other, driving innovation and excellence in ways that benefited every American child with a birthday. By the 1780s, something extraordinary was happening. The German birthday cake tradition was becoming simply American. Non-German families were adopting these elaborate celebrations, ordering increasingly complex cakes, demanding their children receive the same treatment as their German neighbors' kids. Birthday cakes were becoming democratized, at least among those who could afford them. The technical innovations were staggering. Germans introduced the concept of chemical leavening to America, using pearl ash and eventually saleratus to create lighter, fluffier cakes than anything colonists had imagined possible. They pioneered the use of egg whites as a structural element, creating cakes that seemed to float rather than sit. They developed frostings that could survive American summers, no small feat in an era before refrigeration. But perhaps the most lasting German contribution was the birthday cake as emotional expression. These weren't just desserts, they were edible declarations of love. German mothers would wake at 3 in the morning to begin preparing their child's birthday cake, incorporating symbolic elements that told a story. Roses for a daughter coming of age, oak leaves for a son's strength, intricate patterns that represented family history and hopes for the future. The tradition of Kinderfest, those definitely not birthday parties from medieval Germany, evolved into full-blown American birthday celebrations. German communities in Pennsylvania and Ohio maintained the practice of the Lebenslichter, life flights, candles representing each year of life plus one for the coming year. The birthday child would make a wish and attempt to blow them all out in one breath, a tradition so appealing that non-German Americans quickly adopted it. Letters from the period reveal the cultural tensions this created. English American mothers writing to relatives back home, describing these foreign birthday customs with a mixture of disapproval and barely concealed envy. The Germans make quite a spectacle of their children's birthdays, one wrote. With cakes so elaborate one hesitates to cut them. Though I must admit, young Elizabeth was quite enchanted when invited to the Mueller child celebration. The economic impact was substantial. German bakeries created America's first real birthday cake industry. By 1800, Philadelphia alone had 37 German-owned bakeries, most specializing in occasion cakes. They employed hundreds of workers, from apprentice bakers to sugar sculptors to delivery boys who carefully transported these fragile creations through cobblestone streets. Birthday cakes were becoming big business. Some historians argue that German immigrants didn't just influence American birthday traditions, they invented them. Before their arrival, American birthday observances were haphazard, apologetic, often hidden. After, they were public, proud, and absolutely centered on cake. The Germans gave Americans permission to celebrate individual lives, to make a fuss, to spend money on something as frivolous as sugar sculpture for a 6-year-old. The most profound change was psychological. Birthday cakes went from being a luxury to being a necessity, from marking survival to celebrating individuality. German cultural values, emphasizing the worth of each person, the importance of childhood, the idea that everyone deserved their special day, were baked into every layer, mixed into every frosting, lit with every candle. These immigrant bakers, working in hot kitchens from dawn to midnight, speaking broken English while creating perfect roses from marzipan, they were doing more than making cakes. They were creating a new American tradition, one that would eventually become so fundamental that we can't imagine birthdays without it. Soon, one particular American city would take these German foundations and build something even more extraordinary. Philadelphia's bakeries transformed birthday parties forever in 1847. When Elizabeth Leslie publishes the first American cookbook to include detailed birthday cake instructions, and Conrad Weiser opens the city's first commercial cake decorating studio, creating a perfect storm of sugar, ambition, and middle-class anxiety about keeping up with the neighbors. You're peering through the window of Weiser's confectionery on Market Street, watching him pipe delicate sugar roses with a strange new tool he invented, something he calls a forcing bag, essentially a canvas cone that allows him to create decorations no human hands could sculpt alone. Inside, 3 women from Society Hill are arguing about whether 24 sugar doves is excessive for a 5-year-old's birthday cake. Weiser, who escaped political upheaval in Bavaria just 3 years ago, listens patiently while mentally calculating his profit margins. 24 doves it is. The year 1847 marks a turning point so significant that food historians sometimes divide American birthday culture into before Leslie and after Leslie. Her book, The Lady's Receipt Book, didn't just provide recipes, it provided permission. Here was a respectable Philadelphia matron, in print, declaring that elaborate birthday cakes were not only acceptable but necessary for proper American childhood. She wrote, "No well-regulated family should permit a child's birthday to pass without due celebration, the centerpiece of which should be a handsome cake." Leslie's recipes were revolutionary in their specificity. Previous American cookbooks might mention a cake for special occasions, but Leslie provided exact measurements, detailed techniques, and most importantly, decorating instructions that assumed the reader wanted their cake to be spectacular. She introduced American bakers to the concept of crumb coating, the art of tiered construction, and something she called ornamental work that involved architectural planning worthy of a cathedral. The economic context matters here. Philadelphia in 1847 was experiencing unprecedented prosperity. The middle class was expanding, families had disposable income, and nothing said we've made it quite like ordering a custom birthday cake from a professional baker. What had been a German immigrant tradition was becoming an American status symbol, and Philadelphia's bakers were ready to capitalize. Weiser wasn't alone. By 1850, Philadelphia had 43 establishments calling themselves ornamental confectioners, each competing to create more elaborate, more impossible, more Instagram-worthy if Instagram had existed birthday cakes. They advertised in newspapers with language that sounds surprisingly modern. Let your child's special day be remembered forever. Custom creations for discerning families. No request too elaborate. I love discovering old invoices from these bakeries. They read like fantasy novels. One temple of marzipan with working drawbridge, 6 dozen meringue swans in flight, edible gold leaf garden with sugar glass pond. Delivery required 4 men and reinforced carriage. This was for an 8-year-old's birthday. The cost, more than most workers made in 3 months. The technical innovations emerging from Philadelphia's cake competition were remarkable. Bakers developed new forms of icing that could hold their shape for hours. They experimented with food coloring derived from vegetables and insects, creating purples from beets, greens from spinach, reds from crushed cochineal bugs. They invented tools that wouldn't be patented for decades, offset spatulas, rotating cake stands, primitive airbrushes powered by bellows. But here's what really changed everything: the democratization of the birthday cake. While Weiser was creating sugar sculptures for the wealthy, smaller bakeries were figuring out how to mass-produce simpler versions. They developed standard designs, basic decoration sets, affordable options that let working-class families participate in the birthday cake revolution. You could get a number 3 birthday special for a price that wouldn't require selling your furniture. The psychological impact was profound. Children's diaries from the period, preserved in historical societies, reveal an obsession with birthday cakes that borders on mania. Young girls drew pictures of their dream cakes. Boys saved pennies all year to contribute to their siblings' cakes. The birthday cake had become the physical manifestation of being valued, loved, celebrated as an individual. Not having one was social death. Evidence suggests that Philadelphia's cake culture spread through women's networks. Letters between sisters, cousins, friends carried detailed descriptions of cake seen at parties, recipes acquired through various means, gossip about whose cake was store-bought versus homemade. These correspondence networks functioned like 19th century social media, spreading trends, establishing standards, creating pressure to conform. The established Protestant churches, initially suspicious of such lavish celebrations, gradually embraced birthday cakes as teaching tools. Sunday schools started celebrating children's birthdays collectively, with monthly cake celebrations for all children born in that month. This clever compromise maintained religious austerity while acknowledging the cultural importance of birthday recognition. Even Quakers, famous for their simplicity, developed plain cakes that managed to be special while remaining appropriately modest. Philadelphia's newspapers from this period reveal the emergence of birthday cake anxiety. Editorial writers debated whether elaborate cakes were corrupting American youth, creating unrealistic expectations, fostering materialism. One particularly dramatic piece from 1849 warned that the cult of the birthday cake threatens to transform our sturdy Republican children into weak-willed princes and princesses. The author's solution: limit birthday cakes to one layer and no more than 6 decorative elements. Nobody listened. The commercial infrastructure developing around birthday cakes was staggering. Suppliers specialized in cake decorations, importing sugar flowers from France, edible gold from Germany, exotic flavorings from the Caribbean. Delivery services emerged specifically for transporting delicate cakes. Insurance companies offered policies protecting against cake disasters. There were even professional cake consultants who would advise families on appropriate designs for different occasions. The influence of immigrant communities continued to shape Philadelphia's cake evolution. Italian immigrants introduced elaborate cream fillings. Jewish bakers brought honey cake traditions that influenced flavor profiles. Irish immigrants, initially excluded from fancy bakeries, established their own shops that specialized in affordable but delicious alternatives. Each group added layers to the increasingly complex American birthday cake tradition. Leslie's cookbook went through 17 editions, each one adding new cake designs, more elaborate techniques, increasingly ambitious projects. By her final edition in 1857, she was describing cakes that required 48 hours to complete and specialized equipment that cost more than a horse. She had created a monster, a beautiful, delicious, economically significant monster. The standardization of birthday cake expectations happened remarkably quickly. Within a decade, certain elements became non-negotiable: layers, frosting, decorations, candles, writing. The basic template we still use today was established in Philadelphia between 1847 and 1855. Everything since has been variation on themes established in those crucial years. Most revealing are the records from Philadelphia's orphanages and charity schools. Even these institutions, operating on minimal budgets, found ways to provide birthday cakes for their charges. Sometimes just simple pound cakes with a single candle, but cakes nonetheless. The message was clear: every American child, regardless of circumstances, deserved a birthday cake. It had become a right rather than a privilege. The craft guilds that emerged from this period would influence American baking for generations. The Philadelphia Ornamental Confectioners Society, founded in 1851, established standards, training programs, and ethical guidelines that spread throughout the country. They turned birthday cake making from a trade into a profession, complete with certifications, competitions, and controversial debates about whether using pre-made decorations constituted cheating. Commercial photographers, another emerging profession, began specializing in birthday portraits. These images, showing children with their cakes, became family treasures. The cake was often more prominently featured than the child, towering constructions that required special lighting and careful positioning. These photographs spread the Philadelphia style nationwide, as families in frontier towns saw what was possible and demanded their local bakers attempt similar feats. As the 1850s progressed, as the country headed toward civil war, birthday cakes had become embedded in American culture in ways that would have seemed impossible just a generation earlier. Philadelphia had given America something more than just elaborate desserts. It had created a new language of celebration, a way of marking individual worth through sugar and flour. The question now wasn't whether to have a birthday cake, but how elaborate it should be and what those candles on top were really supposed to mean. Yet, something strange happened when Victorian children started making wishes. The simple act of blowing out candles became loaded with supernatural significance, rules, and warnings that would make modern parents call Child Protective Services. You're watching A Birthday Party in Boston, 1878, and 7-year-old Margaret Hamilton is standing before her cake, tears streaming down her face. She's not crying from joy, she's terrified. Her governess has just explained that if she doesn't blow out all 8 candles, the one for each year plus the life light, in a single breath, not only will her wish not come true, but she might actually die before her next birthday. Margaret hyperventilates, aims carefully, and blows with the desperation of someone whose life literally depends on it. She succeeds, barely, and the room erupts in relieved applause. The Victorian era took birthday candles and transformed them into something between a blessing and a curse. What had been a cheerful German tradition became, in the hands of Victorian America, an elaborate system of supernatural beliefs that would have impressed medieval mystics. The rules proliferated like bacteria, each family adding their own variations, their own warnings, their own promises of doom for those who failed to observe proper candle protocol. According to popular belief in the 1870s, each birthday candle represented a year of protection from evil spirits. But here's the catch. That protection only activated if you followed the rules precisely. First, the candles had to be lit by someone who loved you, preferably your mother. Second, you had to make your wish while looking at the flames, but before taking your breath. Third, the wish had to be completely secret, telling anyone would reverse it into a curse. Fourth, and this was crucial, every single candle had to be extinguished in one breath, or the unfulfilled years would be marked by misfortune. The scholarly debate around Victorian birthday superstitions focuses on their origins. Some historians trace them to amalgamated immigrant traditions, German candle customs mixing with Irish folk beliefs, Italian superstitions, and Scottish second sight traditions. Others argue that Victorian Americans invented most of these beliefs wholesale, creating instant traditions to give their new prosperity more meaning. The evidence, frustratingly, supports both theories. Victorian diaries describe birthday candle rituals as both ancient family customs and delightful new fashions from Mrs. So-and-so's household. Evidence from the period suggests that candle manufacturers actively promoted these superstitions. Trade catalogs from the 1880s advertised Lucky Light birthday candles, guaranteed to ensure fortune for the coming year. Some companies sold special candles in different colors, each promising different benefits: pink for love, green for wealth, blue for health, black for, well, you probably didn't want the black ones. The marketing was remarkably sophisticated for its time, playing on parental anxiety and children's natural superstition. I honestly feel bad for Victorian birthday children. Imagine the pressure. You're 8 years old, surrounded by adults who genuinely believe your ability to blow out candles determines your fate, and you have a slight cold that's affecting your lung capacity. The stakes couldn't be higher if you were defusing a bomb. The wish-making component evolved its own complex mythology. Victorian etiquette guides, and yes, they had entire chapters devoted to birthday cake behavior, specified that wishes should be morally improving rather than materialistic. Wishing for toys was considered crass. Wishing for your sister to fall down a well was definitely out. Appropriate wishes included health for family members, success in studies, or vaguely defined happiness. Children were literally coached on proper wish construction. The most bizarre Victorian birthday candle tradition was the fortune cake. Bakers would hide objects in the cake, each with specific meaning. Finding a coin meant wealth, a ring meant marriage, a thimble meant spinsterhood, a button meant bachelorhood. But they also included less pleasant surprises. A tiny coffin meant death, a black bean meant poverty, a small anchor meant you'd die at sea. Imagine biting into your birthday cake and pulling out a tiny coffin. Happy birthday, you're doomed. Letters between Victorian mothers reveal intense anxiety about birthday candle rituals. They'd write to each other seeking advice. Little Charles failed to extinguish all 9 candles last Tuesday. Should we be concerned? Should we repeat the ceremony? The responses were equally serious, discussing protective prayers, compensatory rituals, and whether hiring a spiritual medium might help. The gendered aspects of birthday candle traditions were particularly pronounced. Boys were expected to blow out candles with manly determination, showing their strength and character. Girls were supposed to blow gently, delicately, proving their refinement. The number of cultural expectations loaded onto a simple exhale of breath was staggering. Military academies actually incorporated candle-blowing exercises into their physical training, believing it developed leadership qualities. Medical journals from the 1880s started expressing concern about the birthday candle phenomenon. Doctors reported children fainting from trying to blow out too many candles, developing anxiety disorders around their birthdays, even cases of birthday cake hysteria, where children would have nervous breakdowns at their own parties. One physician in Baltimore suggested limiting birthday candles to 3 maximum, regardless of age. He was largely ignored. The theatrical element of Victorian birthday candle ceremonies reached absurd heights. Wealthy families would dim all lights, creating dramatic darkness before the cake's entrance. Musicians would play specific songs, usually variations on ancient hymns believed to have protective power. Some families required complete silence during the wish-making. Others demanded specific chants. The cake bearer, usually a servant in affluent households, had to walk in prescribed patterns, avoiding unlucky spots on the floor. What's particularly fascinating is how these invented traditions became ancient within a single generation. By the 1890s, young parents were insisting these candle rituals had been passed down for centuries, completely forgetting that their own parents had made them up in the 1870s. The speed at which fake history became accepted truth was remarkable. The commercial exploitation of birthday candle superstitions reached its peak in the 1890s. Department stores sold birthday wish enhancement kits containing special candles, wish papers to burn, protective amulets, and instruction booklets thicker than some novels. Traveling birthday blessing specialists would visit homes to ensure proper candle ceremony execution. There were even insurance policies specifically covering failed birthday wishes, though how they determined payouts remains mysterious. The immigrant communities that had brought simple candle traditions to America watched this evolution with bewilderment. German immigrants wrote letters home describing the American birthday candle madness with a mixture of pride and horror. Their simple tradition of Lebenslichter had mutated into something unrecognizable, like watching your child become a stranger. Children's literature from the period reflects this birthday candle obsession. Popular stories featured heroes and villains whose fates hinged on birthday candle success or failure. The Girl Who Couldn't Blow was a best-selling cautionary tale about a weak-lunged child who brought misfortune to her entire town. Birthday wishes of a brave boy told of a youth whose perfect candle blowing saved his family from poverty. These weren't subtle metaphors. They were literal propaganda for proper candle protocol. The psychological impact on children was profound and lasting. Adults who grew up in the 1880s and 1890s would later write memoirs describing birthday cake anxiety that persisted into their 70s. Some admitted to practicing breathing exercises year-round just to ensure birthday success. Others described elaborate good luck rituals they performed before attempting to blow out candles. The simple joy of birthday celebration had been transformed into an annual trial by fire, or rather, by extinguishing fire. As the Victorian era waned, as the 20th century approached, some voices began questioning whether turning birthday cakes into supernatural tests was really necessary. Progressive educators suggested that perhaps, just perhaps, children could blow out candles without risking cosmic retribution. But by then, the damage was done. The birthday candle wish had become so embedded in American culture that questioning it seemed almost sacrilegious. Meanwhile, in the bustling five-and-dime stores of America's growing cities, a different revolution was brewing, one that would make birthday cakes accessible to everyone, whether they believed in candle magic or not. Perhaps the Rainfall Revolution started in a Boston five-and-dime store, when Frank Woolworth realized that selling birthday decorations for pennies could make him millions. And Betty Crocker discovered that housewives would pay for the promise of perfect cakes without the shame of store-bought. You're standing in Woolworth's on Washington Street, 1912, watching a young Irish mother count coins from her worn purse. She's calculating 5 cents for candles, 3 cents for paper decorations, 10 cents for the new instant frosting powder that promises professional results. For less than a quarter, she can give her daughter what the rich folks on Beacon Hill have, or at least something close enough that a 6-year-old won't know the difference. She makes her purchases, tucks them into her basket, and hurries home to attempt magic. The five-and-dime democratization of birthday cakes represents one of the most profound social transformations in American history. Before 1910, elaborate birthday celebrations were primarily for the wealthy. By 1920, almost every American child expected cake, candles, and decorations on their birthday. This shift happened because entrepreneurs realized that birthday anxiety could be packaged, mass-produced, and sold for pocket change. Woolworth's approach was genius in its simplicity. He didn't try to sell expensive cakes. He sold the components of cake fantasy. Candles in boxes of 24 for a nickel. Cake decorations made from pressed sugar. Dozens of roses for pennies. Paper cake plates that looked almost like china from a distance. Colorful frosting dyes that turned humble homemade cakes into rainbow spectacles. Everything a mother needed to construct the illusion of prosperity, available at prices that wouldn't require skipping meals. The timing couldn't have been better. America's cities were swelling with immigrants and rural migrants, all trying to become real Americans. And what could be more American than a proper birthday cake? The five and dime stores became temples of transformation, where Italian grandmothers learned to make American birthday cakes, where Jewish mothers discovered the mysteries of buttercream, where everyone could purchase a piece of the American dream for less than the price of a beer. Evidence from Woolworth's business records reveals the staggering scale of this transformation. In 1910, the chain sold roughly 50,000 boxes of birthday candles nationwide. By 1915, that number had reached 2 million. By 1920, they were selling more birthday candles than there were children in America, suggesting that adults were getting in on the action too. The birthday cake had gone viral, 1920s style. But here's what really changed everything: the invention of cake mix. In 1918, the Pittsburgh company Ward Baking introduced Presto cake flour, a pre-mixed combination that promised perfect cakes every time. The initial response was complicated. Women were torn between the convenience and the guilt. Was using cake mix cheating? Did it mean you didn't love your children enough to bake from scratch? The moral debates in women's magazines were fierce. I find it hilarious that the same generation that had no problem with cocaine in their Coca-Cola was deeply concerned about the ethics of pre-mixed flour. The letters to editors are amazing. Dear Sir, I recently used a cake mixture for my son's birthday. Am I a bad mother? Signed, Anxious in Albany. The psychological genius of early cake mix marketing was recognizing that women didn't just want easy, they wanted to feel skilled. So manufacturers deliberately made their mixes slightly complicated. You still had to add eggs, milk, sometimes butter. This wasn't laziness, this was modern efficiency. The boxes featured elaborate decorating suggestions, implying that the time saved on mixing could be redirected toward artistic expression. You weren't cutting corners, you were prioritizing creativity. The five and dime stores collaborated with cake mix companies in ways that would make modern marketers jealous. They created birthday headquarters sections, everything strategically placed to encourage impulse purchases. The cake mix next to the frosting tubes, the candles beside the decorations, the party hats adjacent to the small toys perfect for cake top placement. They turned birthday cake creation into a one-stop shopping experience. The democratization had unexpected consequences. As birthday cakes became universal, they also became competitive. PTA meetings turned into passive-aggressive cake battles. Children's birthday parties became showcases of maternal dedication. The pressure simply shifted from affording a cake to creating an impressive one. Democratic access didn't eliminate anxiety, it just redistributed it. School records from the period reveal the social dynamics at play. Teachers reported children crying because their homemade cakes looked inferior to classmates' creations. Some schools banned birthday celebrations altogether, citing unhealthy competition. Others instituted strict cake equality rules. All cakes had to be the same size, same number of candles, same basic decorations. These attempts at cake communism failed spectacularly. Parents simply competed through flavor and moisture content instead. The role of women's magazines in spreading five-and-dime cake culture was crucial. Publications like Ladies' Home Journal and Good Housekeeping featured monthly cake decorating tutorials using exclusively supplies available at Woolworth's or Kresge's. They made cake decorating seem simultaneously achievable and aspirational. Yes, you could do this, but you should probably buy their magazine next month to learn how to do it better. Immigration patterns influenced which five-and-dime birthday supplies sold where. Stores in Italian neighborhoods stocked different decorations than those in Irish areas. Jewish communities had their own preferences. Smart store managers studied their demographics and adjusted inventory accordingly. The birthday cake was becoming American, but it retained ethnic flavors, literally and figuratively. The most profound change was temporal. Before the five-and-dime revolution, planning a birthday cake required weeks of preparation, saving money, sourcing ingredients, booking a baker. After, you could decide to have a party that morning and pull it off by afternoon. Birthday celebrations became spontaneous, flexible, responsive to the moment rather than requiring extensive planning. Labor unions, surprisingly, played a role in the birthday cake revolution. As workers won shorter hours and higher wages, they had both time and money for celebrations. Union halls became birthday party venues. Some unions negotiated birthday leave, time off to celebrate with family. The birthday cake transformed from upper-class privilege to working-class right, enshrined in labor contracts and defended by strikes. The invention of the pressure cooker in the 1910s, marketed primarily to working mothers, made home cake baking faster and more reliable. You could produce a decent cake in half the time with less risk of failure. Pressure cooker companies published special birthday cake recipes, emphasizing speed and convenience. From mixing bowl to birthday table in under an hour, claimed one advertisement, though it didn't mention the potential for explosive failure if you got the pressure wrong. Children's expectations evolved rapidly. What thrilled a child in 1910? A simple cake with a few candles would disappoint by 1920. The baseline kept rising. Cake decorating classes proliferated, taught in YMCAs, settlement houses, church basements. Women who'd mastered the art often supplemented household income by decorating cakes for neighbors. The birthday cake industry was creating its own economy. By 1925, the transformation was complete. The combination of five-and-dime accessibility and cake mix convenience had made birthday cakes mandatory in American childhood. Not having one marked you as either desperately poor or culturally foreign. The pressure to conform was immense, and most families yielded. The birthday cake had won. But even as mothers across America mastered the art of affordable birthday cakes, a new force was emerging that would standardize birthday celebrations in ways nobody could have imagined. Soon, very soon, a glowing box in American living rooms would teach the entire nation exactly what a birthday party should look like. The moment television taught America what birthday parties should look like arrived on October 3rd, 1955. When Captain Kangaroo celebrated his first on-air birthday party, complete with a 3-tier cake, perfect decorations, and 30 million children watching and taking notes. You're sitting in a suburban living room in Levittown, watching your children pressed against the television screen as Captain Kangaroo and Mr. Green Jeans bring out the most magnificent birthday cake you've ever seen. Your daughter turns to you, eyes wide, and says the words that will haunt American mothers for the next generation. Why doesn't my birthday cake look like that? You glance at your kitchen, your limited budget, your questionable baking skills, and realize that television has just raised the bar to impossible heights. The post-war television explosion created something unprecedented in human history, a shared visual vocabulary of celebration. Before TV, birthday parties varied wildly by region, class, ethnicity. After TV, every American child knew exactly what a proper birthday party looked like. It looked like what they saw on screen, pristine, choreographed, and completely disconnected from most families' reality. The shows weren't trying to create birthday anxiety, at least not initially. Programs like Captain Kangaroo, Howdy Doody, and later Romper Room featured birthday segments because producers needed daily content and birthdays were reliably cheerful. But what appeared on screen, professionally decorated cakes, matching party supplies, perfectly behaved children, became the template against which all real birthday parties were measured. Television's influence on birthday cakes specifically was profound and immediate. Within months of Captain Kangaroo's first birthday episode, bakeries reported customers bringing in photographs of their television sets, demanding exact replicas of cakes they'd seen on screen. The problem was that TV cakes were often made of cardboard and shaving cream, designed to look good on camera rather than taste good in reality. But try explaining that to a 6-year-old who wanted Howdy Doody's exact cake. The commercialization was swift and ruthless. By 1957, every major children's show had licensing deals for birthday supplies. You could buy Mouseketeer birthday plates, Roy Rogers cake decorations, Howdy Doody candles. The characters that children loved on screen became essential to their birthday celebrations. Not having themed supplies meant your parents didn't love you enough, or so children believed. I imagine the production meetings where TV executives realized they'd stumbled onto a gold mine. Wait, millions of children have birthdays every year, and they all want what they see on our show. We should make everything. Cakes, hats, napkins, tablecloths. Let's make birthday parties require a second mortgage. The standardization happened with shocking speed. A study from 1958 found that 73% of suburban birthday parties followed essentially the same script: arrival activities, organized games, cake ceremony, presents, departure. This script came directly from television shows that depicted ideal birthday parties. Regional variations, ethnic traditions, family customs, all were being replaced by the televised template. But here's what made television's influence particularly powerful. It wasn't just showing birthday cakes, it was teaching the emotional choreography of birthday celebrations. The exaggerated joy, the synchronized singing, the dramatic candle-blowing moment, the eruption of applause. Television taught Americans not just what birthday parties should look like, but how they should feel. And that feeling was performative perfection. Cake mix companies partnered with television shows in ways that would seem dystopian today. Betty Crocker sponsored entire episodes devoted to birthday cake baking. Duncan Hines created cake mixes specifically designed to recreate TV-featured cakes. The instructions came with scripts, literally scripts, for mothers to follow during the cake presentation. Now Jimmy, make a wish. Pause for child to close eyes. Everyone count to 3. Ensure all guests participate. The pressure on mothers reached breaking point. Women's magazines from the late 1950s are filled with articles about birthday party anxiety disorder, though they didn't call it that. Mothers reported crying after failed attempts to recreate television cakes. Some hired professional bakers, but pretended they'd made the cakes themselves. Others formed secret cake decorating cooperatives, helping each other maintain the illusion of effortless domestic perfection. Evidence from child psychology studies of the era reveals something disturbing. Children were beginning to rate their parents' love based on birthday cake quality. Researchers found direct correlations between cake elaborateness and children's sense of being valued. This wasn't innate, it was learned from thousands of hours of television showing perfect parents providing perfect cakes. The suburban birthday party arms race was real and devastating. Each mother tried to outdo the previous party, leading to increasingly elaborate celebrations that bore no resemblance to actual childhood joy. Pool parties with synchronized swimming, pony rides with matching ribbons, cakes so architectural they required engineering consultations, all because television had shown such things as normal. The cultural homogenization was particularly hard on immigrant families. Their traditional birthday celebrations, often rich with meaning and history, suddenly seemed embarrassing compared to television's American standard. Children begged parents to abandon family customs in favor of TV-approved parties. A generation of cultural tradition was lost to the altar of television conformity. Schools became battlegrounds for birthday cake competition. Teachers reported spending significant class time managing birthday-related drama. Who had the best cake? Whose party was most like TV? Who was invited where? Some schools banned birthday celebrations entirely. Others instituted strict regulations. One Philadelphia school required all birthday cakes to be identical sheet cakes from the same bakery, an attempt at socialist birthday equality that satisfied nobody. The documentary evidence from this period is heartbreaking. Home movies show mothers frantically trying to recreate television magic with limited resources. Children crying because their cake didn't look right. Fathers working overtime to afford increasingly expensive birthday expectations. The simple joy of celebrating another year of life had been transformed into a competitive performance anxiety nightmare. The advertising industry recognized and exploited this anxiety brilliantly. Ads from the period don't sell products, they sell emotional insurance. Don't let your child's birthday be a disappointment. Make memories that match their dreams. Be the mother they'll thank someday. The subtext was clear: fail at the birthday cake, fail at parenting. Network executives later admitted they had no idea what they were unleashing. Internal memos from NBC and CBS show surprise at the commercial potential of birthday-themed programming. One executive wrote in 1959, "Who knew that showing a simple birthday party would create an entire industry? We should have been charging more for those cake mix advertisements." The technological advancement of color television in the 1960s made things exponentially worse. Now the cakes had to be the right colors too. The frosting needed proper vibrancy. The decorations required specific hues. Black and white birthdays were suddenly unacceptable. Parents who couldn't afford color TVs found their children didn't even know what they were missing, but they were missing something. The most insidious aspect was how television made the exceptional seem standard. The birthday parties shown on screen were best-case scenarios, produced with teams of professionals, unlimited budgets, multiple takes. But to children watching, this was simply what birthdays looked like. Their lived experience could never match the edited perfection they consumed daily. By 1960, the television birthday template was so embedded in American culture that deviation seemed almost subversive. Not having a proper cake ceremony, not singing the standard song, not following the prescribed emotional arc. It all marked you as different, possibly dangerous, certainly un-American. The psychological impact persists today. Baby boomers still describe birthday cake anxiety that stems directly from 1950s television exposure. The need for birthday perfection, the fear of disappointing children, the competitive party planning, all of it traces back to those first televised birthday cakes that taught America that love could be measured in layers and frosting. As we moved into the modern era, as television gave way to social media and Instagram-worthy celebrations, you might think the pressure would ease. But the question remains, why do we still insist on this ritual, this tradition of setting food on fire before consuming it? Finally, why do we still insist on setting food on fire before eating it? The answer involves evolutionary psychology, corporate manipulation, and a collective delusion so powerful that we can't imagine birthdays without it. You're watching a birthday party in 2010, then 2015, then 2020. And despite all the technological advancement, despite our supposed sophistication, despite knowing that blowing spit particles across food is objectively unsanitary, we're still lighting candles on cakes and making wishes. The ritual has survived world wars, pandemics, cultural revolutions, and the invention of LED candles that would be safer and more practical. We cling to this ancient fire ceremony like our ancestors clutching protective amulets because maybe, deep down, we still believe in the magic. The psychological research on birthday cake attachment is genuinely fascinating. Studies from the 1990s through today consistently show that people remember their birthday cakes with unusual clarity, often better than they remember the presents they received or even who attended their parties. The cake becomes the memory anchor, the physical manifestation of being celebrated. Neuroscientists have found that the smell of birthday cake activates the same brain regions associated with maternal comfort and childhood security. We're literally addicted to the feeling. The corporate exploitation of this psychological attachment has been masterful. The American birthday cake industry, now worth over $4 billion annually, doesn't sell cakes. It sells emotional insurance. Every marketing campaign essentially promises the same thing: buy our product or risk traumatizing your child forever. The manipulation is so transparent it should be insulting, yet it works because the stakes feel too high to risk failure. Evidence from recent psychological studies suggests something disturbing. We've created a generation that cannot separate love from consumer goods. Children as young as 3 can articulate that birthday cake quality correlates with parental affection. This isn't natural, it's programmed through decades of consistent messaging that love equals stuff, and the fancier the stuff, the greater the love. But here's the really weird part. We all know it's nonsense, yet we participate anyway. Parents openly acknowledge the absurdity of spending hundreds of dollars on elaborate cakes that will be destroyed in minutes, then do it anyway. It's like we're all trapped in a collective performance that nobody can figure out how to stop. The emperor has no clothes, but the emperor's birthday cake has 3 tiers and costs more than a car payment. I recently watched a video of parents attempting to explain to their child why they couldn't have a birthday cake during lockdown. The child's complete incomprehension that birthdays could exist without cake was genuinely disturbing. We've created a generation that believes birthday cakes are as essential as oxygen. The evolutionary psychology explanations are particularly creative. Some researchers argue that birthday cakes tap into ancient feast-sharing rituals that promoted tribal bonding. Others suggest the candle blowing mimics primitive fire control demonstrations that established dominance. The wish-making component supposedly derives from prayer rituals to protective deities. It's all very clever and completely unprovable, but it sounds scientific enough that people nod along. The most compelling explanation might be the simplest. We do it because we've always done it, or at least, we think we've always done it. The manufactured tradition has become so embedded that questioning it feels like questioning gravity. Of course birthdays have cakes. Of course cakes have candles. Of course we make wishes. To suggest otherwise marks you as either culturally ignorant or deliberately contrarian. International perspectives reveal how specifically American this obsession has become. Anthropologists studying birthday celebrations worldwide find that while many cultures mark birthdays, the cake and candle complex is predominantly American export. We've successfully colonized the world with our birthday anxiety, spreading our neurosis through movies, television, and social media until Korean children and Brazilian teenagers all expect American-style birthday cakes. The pandemic briefly threatened to disrupt the birthday cake industrial complex. Suddenly, blowing on communal food seemed obviously insane. Companies rushed to develop sanitary candle solutions, individual cupcakes, candle shields, even apps that let you blow out virtual candles. The fact that we needed technological solutions rather than just not blowing on food reveals how deeply this ritual has infected our psyche. Recent studies on birthday cake stress are genuinely alarming. Parents report birthday party planning as more stressful than job interviews, medical procedures, even divorce proceedings. The pressure to create Pinterest-perfect celebrations has driven some to therapy. There are now birthday party planners who specialize in managing parental anxiety rather than actual party logistics. We've created an entire therapeutic industry around cake-related trauma. The social media amplification has made everything exponentially worse. Every birthday cake now needs to be Instagram-worthy, which means either professional quality home baking or expensive custom orders. The documentation has become more important than the experience. Children perform joy for cameras. Parents perform competence for other parents. Everyone performs tradition for an audience that's simultaneously judging and desperately seeking validation for their own performances. Yet despite all this manufactured stress, despite knowing we're being manipulated, despite the expense and anxiety and obvious absurdity, we continue. We perpetuate the cycle with our own children, teaching them that birthdays require cakes, cakes require candles, candles require wishes, wishes require belief in magic we don't actually believe in. The behavioral economists have a field day with birthday cake irrationality. We'll spend $200 on a cake that provides maybe $20 worth of enjoyment, and we know this. Yet we do it anyway. We'll stress for weeks about something that lasts 30 minutes. We'll go into debt for parties children won't even remember. It's a case study in how social pressure overrides economic logic. Some historians argue that birthday cakes represent the last acceptable form of magical thinking in secular society. We've abandoned most superstitions, but we still teach children to close their eyes, make a wish, and believe that extinguishing small fires will influence their future. It's simultaneously heartwarming and deeply weird that this specific irrationality survived while others died. The resistance movements are small but growing. Cake-free birthday groups share alternative celebration ideas. Anti-fondant activists rail against the prioritization of appearance over taste. Birthday minimalists advocate for returning to simple homemade cakes. But they're fighting against centuries of accumulated tradition, billions in corporate investment, and the weight of every Hallmark movie ever made. The neurological research suggests we might be literally unable to stop. The birthday cake neural pathways are established in early childhood, reinforced annually, and connected to our deepest emotional memories. Trying to eliminate birthday cakes would be like trying to eliminate smiling. Theoretically possible, but practically impossible and probably psychologically harmful. Perhaps the most honest assessment comes from a 7-year-old interviewed in a recent study. When asked why birthday cakes matter, she replied, "Because if you don't have a cake, it's just a regular day where people give you stuff. The cake transforms time, makes ordinary extraordinary, proves that this day, this person, this moment matters enough to set something on fire." The question isn't really why we still do it. It's whether we could stop if we wanted to. The answer, disturbingly, is probably not. The birthday cake has evolved from food to symbol to necessity to compulsion. We're all addicted to a tradition that was invented by medieval monks, commercialized by German immigrants, democratized by 5-and-dime stores, standardized by television, and now holds us hostage to its sugar-frosted demands. But perhaps there's something beautiful in this collective irrationality, this agreement to pretend that wishes come true, that candles ward off evil, that love can be measured in layers of cake. Every grocery store cake today carries 2,000 years of human hope, from Roman cheese offerings to Victorian terror to Instagram perfection, each layer holding the weight of countless wishes that probably didn't come true, but somehow still mattered. You're standing in the bakery section of a Kroger at 9 p.m., fluorescent lights humming overhead, watching a tired father point at generic cakes behind smudged glass. "That one," he says, indicating a chocolate sheet cake with roses that look like they were piped by someone who'd rather be anywhere else. The bakery worker, equally exhausted, pulls it out and asks, "What name?" The father spells out Sophia slowly, carefully, as if this mass-produced sugar rectangle will somehow convey to his daughter all the love he can't quite put into words. Tomorrow, this $30 cake will become the center of a universe, if only for the length of a song. This is where our journey through birthday cake history lands, not in some fancy patisserie or trendy cupcake boutique, but in the fluorescent reality of grocery store bakeries where most Americans actually get their birthday cakes. These industrial-scale operations, producing millions of identical special cakes, represent the final democratization of a tradition that started with ancient Greeks trying to appease moon goddesses. The modern grocery store birthday cake is a technological marvel that would astound our ancestors. The frosting, engineered to survive weeks without refrigeration. The cake, formulated to maintain moisture despite being frozen, thawed and frozen again. The decorations, mass-produced in factories where workers pipe 10,000 roses a day. It's the culmination of 2 millennia of human effort to make something special out of flour, sugar, and hope. Current industry data reveals something profound. Despite all our food sophistication, despite artisanal everything, despite the rise of dietary restrictions and health consciousness, Americans still buy roughly 250 million birthday cakes annually. That's 3/4 of a cake for every person, every year. We're literally eating our way through a tradition that refuses to die. The sociological studies on grocery store birthday cakes are unexpectedly moving. Researchers find that these humble cakes, dismissed by food snobs as corporate garbage, carry enormous emotional weight for recipients. The cake from Safeway means just as much to a 5-year-old as the $500 custom creation means to a Manhattan socialite's child. Love, it turns out, doesn't require fondant sculpture. But here's what's really happening in those grocery store bakery departments: a quiet revolution in tradition keeping. The decorators, often immigrants themselves, bring techniques from their home countries. The Vietnamese decorator adds subtle flavor notes. The Mexican baker incorporates tres leches influences. The Eastern European worker knows 17 ways to make roses. These grocery store cakes are secretly international collaborations, fusion desserts hiding behind American frosting. I think about all the midnight runs to 24-hour grocery stores, parents suddenly remembering it's their kid's birthday tomorrow, frantically selecting from whatever's left in the case. Those cakes, selected in panic, paid for with credit cards that shouldn't be used, transported home like precious cargo. They're acts of love just as profound as any elaborate home-baked creation. The environmental impact of our birthday cake obsession is staggering. The packaging alone, plastic containers, cardboard boxes, synthetic decorations, creates mountains of waste. The transportation networks required to deliver fresh cakes daily to thousands of stores burn countless gallons of fuel. Yet we accept this ecological cost because the alternative, birthdays without cakes, seems impossible to contemplate. Recent innovations in grocery store birthday cakes reflect our changing culture. Gluten-free options that actually taste decent. Vegan cakes that would have seemed impossible 20 years ago. Sugar-free versions for diabetic grandparents. Allergen-free alternatives ensuring no child gets excluded. The grocery store bakery has become a laboratory for inclusive celebration. The psychological studies on birthday cake memory formation are remarkable. Adults can describe in vivid detail grocery store cakes from 40 years ago, the specific shade of blue frosting, the way the roses were arranged, the slightly chemical taste of the decorative gel. These mass-produced cakes become permanently encoded in our emotional memory, proof that meaning isn't inherent in objects but is signed by experience. The economic ecosystem around grocery store birthday cakes is vast and hidden. The cake mix suppliers, the frosting manufacturers, the candle companies, the plastic decoration factories, the food coloring corporations, thousands of businesses, millions of jobs, all depending on our continued belief that birthdays require cake. It's too big to fail, not because of economics, but because of emotions. Evidence from recent consumer behavior studies shows something interesting. Even as we Instagram our elaborate home-baked creations, most of us still secretly prefer grocery store cake. The taste of that particular frosting, sweet enough to hurt your teeth, triggers childhood memories that no amount of Swiss meringue buttercream can replicate. We're nostalgic for artificial flavors that didn't exist until the 1960s. The global influence of American grocery store birthday cakes is surreal. You can find nearly identical cakes in supermarkets from Tokyo to Sao Paulo, the same roses, the same inscriptions, the same ritualistic consumption. We've exported not just the cake, but the entire emotional framework, the expectations, the disappointments, the moments of transcendence when ordinary flour and sugar somehow equals love. The recent COVID years revealed our desperate attachment to birthday cake traditions. When grocery store bakeries closed, people paid extraordinary amounts for delivery. When gatherings were impossible, we held virtual parties where everyone ate cake simultaneously over Zoom. When candle blowing became hazardous, we invented elaborate workarounds rather than simply skip that part. The tradition adapted rather than died, proving its psychological necessity. Contemporary food historians argue we're living through peak birthday cake, that future generations will look back at our current practices with the same bewilderment we feel toward Victorian fortune cakes with hidden coffins. They predict the tradition will fragment, personalize, potentially disappear as younger generations create new celebration markers. But similar predictions have been made for 50 years, and the cakes keep coming. The mindfulness movement has tried to reform birthday cake culture, suggesting we focus on presence over presence, experience over sugar. But even meditation retreats celebrate birthdays with cake. Even minimalists make exceptions for birthday traditions. The cake persists because it represents something beyond consumption, a pause in ordinary life, a moment when an individual matters more than the collective. Some anthropologists suggest grocery store birthday cakes represent humanity's last universal ritual. Every culture has adopted them. Every economic class participates. Every generation expects them. In an increasingly fragmented world, the birthday cake remains something we all understand. The song might be sung in different languages, but everyone knows to make a wish. The sustainability experts propose radical alternatives, reusable candles, projection mapping instead of frosting, virtual cakes in the metaverse. But none gain traction because they miss the essential point. The birthday cake isn't about the cake. It's about the gathering, the pause, the agreement to pretend magic exists for exactly the time it takes to sing a song. Looking forward, the birthday cake industry faces challenges: sugar taxes, health consciousness, environmental concerns, cultural shifts. Yet betting against birthday cakes seems foolish. They've survived monasteries, Puritans, world wars, pandemics, and the invention of kale smoothies. They'll probably survive whatever comes next. The most honest assessment might be this: grocery store birthday cakes are terrible and perfect. Their mass-produced uniqueness, artificial authenticity, industrial intimacy. They're everything wrong with modern consumerism and everything right with human hope. They're proof that we can transform anything, even pre-processed sugar paste, into love. As this story of birthday cakes in America concludes, as you drift deeper into the evening, consider the absurd beauty of our collective agreement. Tomorrow, someone will walk into a grocery store and buy a cake that thousands of others have also purchased. They'll put a name on it, light candles, sing an old song, and somehow, through this utterly ordinary ritual, make someone feel extraordinarily special. The tradition continues not because it makes sense, but because love rarely does. And so, here we are, at the end of our journey through birthday cake history. You're breathing probably slower now, your mind holding these strange stories of monks and immigrants, television and grocery stores, all the unlikely moments that led to our modern birthday traditions. It's remarkable, really, how something as simple as flour and sugar became so essential to American life, how ancient fears about evil spirits transformed into cheerful singing, how German cake pans and Victorian superstitions and 5-cent candles all merged into something we can't imagine childhood without. As you settle deeper into rest, let these images drift through your mind. Medieval kitchens filled with honey smoke, colonial mothers saving precious sugar, Philadelphia bakeries creating impossible towers of frosting, children pressing faces against television screens, tired parents in fluorescent grocery stores. All of them, across all these centuries, trying to create the same thing, a moment of celebration, a pause in ordinary life, a way to say you matter through cake. The candles we light tomorrow, they're the same flames the Greeks lit for Artemis, the same wishes Roman children made to their protective spirits, the same hopes Victorian parents held, despite their fears. Every birthday cake is a time machine, connecting us to thousands of years of human longing, human joy, human absurdity. Your pillow is soft beneath your head now, your body growing heavier, more peaceful. And maybe you're thinking about your own birthday cakes, the ones you remember, the ones you've forgotten, the grocery store sheet cakes and homemade disasters, the perfect ones and the imperfect ones that somehow meant even more. They're all part of this continuing story, this tradition we inherited without asking for it and pass on, without quite knowing why, except that it feels necessary, feels right, feels like love, translated into sugar and ceremony. The night is quiet around you, you're breathing deep and steady. And somewhere right now, in some 24-hour grocery store, someone is buying tomorrow's birthday cake, continuing this ancient, illogical, beautiful tradition. Let your thoughts grow softer now, like frosting melting in warm sunlight, like candle smoke dissipating into evening air. The stories are settling into that deep place where history becomes dream, where facts blur into feeling. Close your eyes if they're still open. Let your mind wander through these centuries of celebration and know that every birthday cake you've ever eaten, ever will eat, connects you to this vast human story, this agreement we all make to mark time with sweetness, to fight darkness with tiny flames, to believe, just for the length of a song, in wishes coming true. Sleep is approaching now, gentle and inevitable, like the end of a birthday party. When the guests have gone home, the candles have been blown out, and all that remains is the sweet aftertaste of celebration and the quiet certainty of being loved. Rest well, dream sweetly, and remember, you're part of this story too. Every birthday you've celebrated, every candle you've lit, every wish you've made, they all matter, they all count, they're all threads in this tapestry of tradition that stretches back through time and forward into tomorrow. The history is complete, the story's told, and now there's nothing left but peaceful sleep and perhaps the faint scent of birthday cake drifting through your dreams.